Officer Ryan Hale was patrolling the frozen streets of Willow Creek when he saw a little girl sitting by the market gate, her tiny hands clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Dog for sale, $2." Beside her lay a trembling German shepherd, eyes dim yet loyal, as if guarding the last piece of her heart. When Ryan knelt down and asked why, the girl whispered, "My stepmother said if I don't sell him, I'll be thrown out." She had lost her mother 6 years ago, her father 2 winters past. And now the world was taking away the only friend she had left. But what neither of them knew, what no one in town could have guessed, was that the broken dog she tried to sell for $2 once served as a decorated canine hero. And that fate had just reunited 3 souls who needed saving. What happened next will make you cry and believe in second chances again. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Willow Creek, Colorado, was still half asleep under a blanket of frost. The air carried that sharp metallic cold that bit through coats and silence alike. Wooden storefronts lined the narrow street, their signs swaying faintly in the wind. Every exhale turned to smoke. Officer Ryan Hale, 35, guided his patrol car through the snow-coated road. The heater hummed, fighting the chill that crept through the windows. His dark brown hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was neatly trimmed, and his storm-gray eyes scanned the quiet streets out of habit more than hope. A former Marine, now a sheriff's deputy, Ryan had grown used to loneliness since the accident that took his wife. He told himself that duty was enough. It was then, near the market gate, that he saw her. A little girl sat on the curb, knees hugged to her chest, a cardboard sign propped beside her that read in uneven red crayon, "Dog for sale, $2." Ryan slowed, frowning. She couldn't have been older than 9. Her brown hair tangled under a wool hat, her cheeks raw from the cold. The sleeves of her oversized coat hid her hands completely. But what struck him most wasn't her stillness. It was the way she sat beside a German shepherd, an older one, fur rough and streaked with gray, one paw lifted slightly off the ground as if old wounds still ached. The dog's eyes, deep amber and intelligent, followed Ryan as he approached. He crouched a few feet away. "Hey there," he said softly. "You selling your dog?" The girl looked up. Her voice trembled. "Yes, sir." "What's his name?" "Max," she said. "He's 8. Ryan blinked. The dog's age explained the lines of fatigue, the quiet dignity. "Why sell him?" he asked. The little girl swallowed hard. "My stepmom said if I don't, she'll throw me out. Said he's no good anymore. Eats too much." Ryan felt a knot form in his chest. "And your parents?" "My mom died when I was 3, she murmured. "Dad got sick 2 winters ago. He didn't make it." Her eyes glistened. "Max was my birthday present when I turned 5. Daddy said a brave heart needs a brave friend." For a long moment, Ryan said nothing. The dog shifted closer to her, head pressed to her arm. He could almost feel the years that lived in both their eyes. Too much loss for such a small child. Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. "Tell you what, I'll give you the $2, but you and Max both come with me for a while, somewhere warm. Sound good?" She blinked in confusion. "You want both of us?" He nodded. "Just to make sure you're safe. You can rest a bit. We'll talk about what to do next." The girl hesitated, glancing at the dog. "Okay," she whispered finally. Ryan opened the passenger door of his patrol car. Max rose slowly, stiff in the hind legs, and helped guide the girl forward as though he understood. Inside the car, the heater hummed. Sophie sat hugging Max, rubbing his neck. Ryan adjusted the mirror to watch them as he drove. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophie," she said softly. "That's a pretty name." She offered a shy smile, then looked out of the window. Snow flurries drifted past the glass like falling stars. Ryan tried to keep the conversation gentle. "You been in school lately?" She shook her head. "Stepmom said there's no point. Said I should help clean the house." He frowned. "You like to read?" "Yes," she said, her voice warming slightly. "Dad used to read me stories about police dogs. He said they were the bravest." She looked down at Max. "He always said Max was special, smarter than the rest." Ryan's eyes softened. "He looks it." The dog lifted his head, watching Ryan through the mirror. For a moment, the officer could have sworn he saw recognition, an old soldier's steadiness meeting another's. As they rolled past the marketplace, Ryan's gaze caught on something strange. A man was standing near the vegetable stalls, a tall figure in a gray coat, his hands deep in his pockets, face hidden beneath a wool cap. The man's eyes tracked the patrol car, unblinking. Ryan's instincts stirred. The man's shoulders tensed. Then, noticing Ryan's glance, he turned sharply, pretending to rearrange crates of apples. But Ryan caught it. The faint twitch of nervousness, the way his fingers fumbled a little too fast. Sophie noticed Ryan looking. "Do you know him?" "No," Ryan said evenly, "just making sure no one else freezes out here." But as he started the engine again, he caught one more glimpse through the side mirror. The man wasn't rearranging anything. He was watching them drive away, his expression tight, worried, almost afraid. Ryan turned the heater up another notch, the car humming through the snowy street. Sophie leaned her head against the window, eyelids heavy. Max settled on the floorboard beside her, muzzle on her knee. His ears flicked each time the engine changed pitch, trained, alert even in rest. Ryan glanced at them again, his chest tightening. Something about that pair, the girl clinging to her old dog, the dog quietly guarding what was left of her heart, awoke something he thought was gone in him. The radio crackled faintly. "Unit 7, report status." Ryan lifted the receiver. "This is Hale. I'm bringing in a miner and her dog. We'll brief at station." "Copy that." He replaced the mic and looked out through the windshield. Snow swept across the road like a curtain. The headlights carved a narrow path through the white. Behind them, the town lights dimmed into haze, and near the market, that same vendor stood half-hidden under his stall canopy, watching the patrol car fade into the storm. His gloved hands gripped the counter, knuckles white, eyes following until the red taillights disappeared completely. Ryan didn't notice. He was already planning the next steps. Contact social services, check for prior neglect reports, maybe take the girl to the diner for soup first. But deep down, something else stirred. An instinct whispering that the story wasn't as simple as a cruel stepmother and a starving child. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The German shepherd gave a low sigh, resting his head again, and Sophie finally drifted into sleep beside him. Outside, the wind rose, carrying snow through the darkening streets. And as the patrol car turned toward the distant glow of the sheriff's station, the small cardboard sign, "Dog for sale, $2, lay forgotten on the curb, its red letters blurring under the falling snow. The snow outside had turned to a quiet whisper when Officer Ryan Hale pulled into the small parking lot of the Willow Creek Sheriff's Station. The neon sign above the door buzzed weakly in the cold. He parked near the back, cut the engine, and looked over at the sleeping girl beside him. Sophie's head had slumped against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Max lay curled at her feet on the car mat, one ear flicking at every sound. Ryan sat for a moment, watching them both, then exhaled slowly. "All right, let's get you warm," he murmured. Inside, the station felt older than its paint. A faint smell of coffee and paper filled the air. The walls were lined with framed commendations, and a corkboard cluttered with wanted notices. Ryan guided Sophie to a worn wooden bench near the heater. She rubbed her arms, looking small against the big empty room. "Wait here a minute," Ryan said softly. He disappeared into the break room and returned with a paper cup of warm milk and a small plate of butter cookies. "Eat," he said, handing it to her. "You'll feel better." Sophie nodded politely, murmuring a soft "thank you." Max sat close, his head level with her knees, eyes never leaving her face. Ryan crouched beside the dog, studying him again in the brighter light. Now that the snow had melted from his fur, the details were clearer. Scars along his flank, faint lines at the base of his neck, and a posture that spoke more of discipline than fear. When Ryan reached toward him, Max didn't flinch. He simply watched, steady, assessing. "Looks like you've been through a lot, buddy," Ryan murmured. The dog's tail tapped once against the floor, as if acknowledging the observation. Sophie watched them quietly before speaking. "He's brave," she said. "Sometimes when Linda, my stepmom, yells, he stands in front of me. Once she tried to hit me with a broom and Max grabbed it and pulled it away. She kicked him after that. He limped for days." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She hurt him?" Sophie nodded, eyes downcast. "She says dogs don't feel pain like people do, but I think he feels everything." Ryan leaned back on his heels, anger flickering under the surface. He forced himself to keep his tone calm. "How long has that been happening?" "Since Daddy died," she whispered. Before that, she pretended to be nice. After the funeral, she said the house was hers. She stopped cooking for me. Sometimes she locks the fridge. Ryan clenched his fists briefly, then rose. "You did the right thing today, Sophie," he said firmly. "You and Max are safe now." She looked up, eyes wide and uncertain. "Can we stay here tonight? Just until morning?" "Of course," he said. "You'll stay in my office for now, and Max can stay right beside you." Relief softened her face, and she gave a small nod. Ryan turned when the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Deputy Cole, broad-shouldered and in his early 40s, stepped in carrying a folder and a cup of coffee. His sandy hair was cut close to his head, and a week's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. Cole had been born and raised in Denver before transferring to Willow Creek a few years ago. A good-natured man with a quick grin and the calm instincts of a veteran cop. "Didn't expect you back this early," Cole said, sipping his coffee. Then his eyes landed on the girl and the dog. "Well, I'll be damned. What's this?" Ryan explained briefly. The market, the sign, the threat from the stepmother. Cole's grin faded to a frown. "Poor kid," he muttered. As they spoke, Max's ears flicked toward Cole. The deputy froze mid-sentence. "You see that?" he said quietly. "That dog's tracking every move I make." Ryan nodded. "He's not just any mutt. Look at the way he sits, balanced, alert, never breaking eye contact. That's training." Cole crouched a little, careful not to startle him. "Mind if I?" he asked, reaching slowly toward the dog. Max didn't growl, only sniffed his hand once before settling again. "You're right," Cole said. "This one's seen some service." Ryan motioned toward the faint mark on Max's neck. "Check this." Cole leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. "That's no ordinary scar. Looks like where they implant the chip tags." Sophie's head jerked up. "Chip? Identification tag," Ryan explained gently. "Police dogs, K9s, have them, same as service animals. It helps track them if they're injured or missing." Cole straightened. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "back when I was in Denver, there was a K9 named Bravo 7 who vanished during a warehouse explosion. They never found the body, just the wreckage. He was a German Shepherd, too, around this size and color." Ryan raised a brow. "You remember how long ago that was?" 3 years, give or take," Cole said. "He was 6 back then, so that'd make him about 8 now." He glanced down at Max. "Fits the age." Ryan exhaled slowly, looking at Sophie. "Your dad said he got Max from a shelter?" "Yes," she replied, "from the one in Denver. He said they didn't know much about him, just that he'd been found wandering near a highway." Ryan exchanged a look with Cole. The same city, the same timing, the same breed. Cole scratched his chin. "I can ask around. Maybe the old handler's still in touch with someone at the K9 unit." "Do it," Ryan said quietly, "but keep it off the record for now." Cole nodded and left the room, phone already in hand. Ryan returned to Sophie, who had finished her milk and was stroking Max's back absent-mindedly. "You doing okay?" he asked. She gave a small nod. "I just don't want him to be taken away." "He won't be," Ryan promised. "Not while I'm here." For the next hour, he filled out reports. Temporary. Protection. Possible neglect case. Preliminary investigation pending. He paused occasionally to glance up. Max had dozed off, his head resting on Sophie's lap. The girl herself had leaned back against the chair, eyelids drooping. Ryan smiled faintly. It was the first time since he'd met them that she looked peaceful. Cole returned, lowering his voice. "I called an old contact in Denver PD. He said Bravo 7's handler died in that explosion. They assumed the dog went down too. If this is him, that's one hell of a story." Ryan looked at Max again. The scars, the calm alertness, the loyalty that seemed carved into his very bones. "Yeah," he said softly. "One hell of a story." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling against the frosted windows. The town clock struck 10. Ryan turned off the desk lamp and laid a folded blanket over Sophie's shoulders. She stirred, murmuring something about her father, then fell silent again. Max opened one eye, watched Ryan for a moment, and then closed it, his breathing slow and steady. Ryan lingered by the window, staring into the snow. He knew what tomorrow would bring, calls to child services, questions, paperwork, but tonight felt different. There was something in that girl's quiet courage, in the dog's watchful calm, that broke through the cold armor of his routine. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. The moment he saw those eyes, Sophie's and Max's, he understood they had already begun to change his life. Morning broke pale and brittle over Willow Creek. Frost glittered on every rooftop, and the cold air bit hard enough to make breath visible like smoke. Officer Ryan Hale parked his patrol car in front of a faded two-story house on Maple Street, the address listed as Sophie Carter's residence. The place looked weary, like it had been left to rot from the inside out. Paint peeled from the siding, the porch sagged under its own weight, and one shutter hung loose, creaking faintly in the wind. Ryan stepped out of the car, his boots crunching over the frozen driveway. He'd left Sophie and Max safely at the station under Deputy Cole's watch, with instructions to keep the girl warm and let the dog rest. Now it was time to confirm her story. The yard was cluttered with forgotten things, an overturned tricycle half buried in snow, a plastic laundry basket cracked along the rim, and the remnants of what might once have been a flower bed. The snow near the back door was disturbed, a trail of small footprints leading to and from the porch. Ryan crouched, tracing the faint outlines. They were Sophie's size. He straightened and knocked on the front door. For a moment, silence. Then, hurried footsteps. The door opened just wide enough for a woman to peer through. Linda Carter, around 30, stood framed in the doorway. Her blonde hair was hastily tied back, a cigarette dangling from her fingers. Her face, though pretty once, had hardened, cheekbones sharp, eyes cold and calculating. She wore a cheap wool robe and slippers, the smell of stale perfume and smoke clinging to her. "Officer," she said, voice flat, "what's this about?" Ryan flashed his badge. "Mrs. Carter, I'm here to talk about your stepdaughter, Sophie." Linda's eyes flickered, but her expression stayed tight. "Oh, her. What's she done now?" "She's safe," Ryan replied evenly. "I found her near the market last night. She said you told her to sell her dog or leave the house." Linda snorted and crossed her arms. "That girl exaggerates everything. You know how kids are, always making up stories to get attention. According to her, you haven't been feeding her properly," Ryan continued. She rolled her eyes. "Good Lord. I work 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, and she claims I starve her? That's rich." Ryan studied her quietly. There was something too rehearsed about the indignation in her voice. "Mind if I step inside?" Linda hesitated, then opened the door wider with a forced smile. "Fine, but make it quick. I've got somewhere to be." Inside, the house felt colder than the street. The air was stale, heavy with the cigarette smoke and damp. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the counter. The living room was dim. Curtains drawn, furniture mismatched and coated in dust. Ryan's eyes caught a small photo frame on the mantel. Sophie, at about 5 years old, grinning between her father, a smiling, middle-aged man with kind eyes, and Max as a young, strong dog. The frame was cracked. Your husband, Ryan said quietly, nodding to the photo. Was, Linda corrected, plucking the cigarette from her mouth. Heart failure, 2 years ago. Left me with the house and a pile of medical bills. Ryan's tone remained calm. And Sophie? She's difficult, Linda said, turning away. Ungrateful. I've done my best, but she won't listen. Always sneaking food for that mutt instead of doing her chores. Max, Ryan said, meeting her gaze. That mutt might be the only family she has left. Linda's lips tightened. Then maybe she should learn to live without him. He's old, eats too much, and smells like a barn. Ryan said nothing for a moment, and he took a slow look around the room. No school supplies, no signs of a child's presence, not even a coat small enough to fit Sophie hanging by the door. "May I see her room?" he asked. Linda hesitated, then shrugged. "If it helps end this faster." She led him down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of mildew. The room was barely that. Just a cot, a thin blanket, and an old dresser with one missing drawer. The window had no curtain. The air inside was freezing. "She's lucky to have a roof at all," Linda said sharply when she caught his look. Ryan turned toward her, his voice low but firm. "You've been collecting your late husband's pension, correct?" Linda's eyes narrowed. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Just making sure paperwork's in order," he said. "Do you still have the policy documents?" Her gaze darted away for a second too long. "Of course I do. Why wouldn't I? Mind if I see them?" Her jaw set. "I'm not showing you my personal papers without a warrant." Ryan studied her for another long moment. The defensive posture, the quick shift in tone. He'd seen it before. Guilt hiding behind irritation. He stepped back toward the living room. "That's fine, Mrs. Carter. I'll note your cooperation in the report." Linda's smile returned. Too quick, too thin. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to get ready for work." Ryan nodded once and stepped outside. The cold hit him immediately, but he welcomed it. It was cleaner out here. He pulled his gloves back on and walked around the side of the house, taking in the details. Peeling paint, broken gutters, trash bags piled against the wall. Then something caught his eye. A faint trail in the snow led from the side door to the small storm cellar beneath the back porch. The latch was half covered by a fallen plank. Ryan knelt to brush it aside. The lock was rusted, but recently handled. The snow above it disturbed. Footprints faint but visible. Small ones again, Sophie's size. He was about to check further when a low, distant growl reached his ears. Ryan turned. Max was standing. Near the fence, having slipped from the patrol car's open door where Cole had let him stretch his legs earlier. The dog's fur bristled. His ears forward, eyes locked on the cellar. Ryan moved closer. "Easy, boy." Max's growl deepened, not in threat, but warning. He sniffed at the edge of the cellar door, pawed at it once, then looked back at Ryan, tail stiff. Ryan crouched beside him. "What is it, Max?" The dog pressed his nose to the crack, sniffed again, and gave a low whine that sent a chill through Ryan's spine. He tugged at the latch, but it didn't budge. The wood was old, but solid. "All right," he murmured. "We'll come back with a warrant." Max didn't move for a moment. His eyes lingered on the cellar, ears twitching, before he finally stepped back to Ryan's side. Ryan looked once more at the house, the shutter banging softly, the smoke from the chimney curling like a warning sign against the gray sky, and felt that same unease he'd had at the market when the vendor watched him drive away. Something about this house didn't just feel cruel, it felt dishonest. He gave Max a pat on the head. "Let's get you back, old man." As they walked toward the car, the wind carried faint sounds from inside the house. Something shifting behind the walls, like a drawer closing or a box being moved. Ryan glanced back but saw nothing through the frosted windows. He climbed into the car, started the engine, and took one last look at the house in the rearview mirror. Linda was standing in the front doorway, arms crossed, watching him go. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, cold and sharp, followed him until the patrol car disappeared down the snowy road. The wind had sharpened by late afternoon, carrying the scent of snow and the far-off hum of engines down Willow Creek's narrow streets. Inside the sheriff's station, the soft yellow lights hummed against the gray light filtering through frosted windows. Ryan Hale stood near his desk, hands in his pockets, watching Max lie on a blanket near the heater. The old German shepherd looked calmer now, though his eyes followed every movement in the room with quiet vigilance. Sophie sat nearby on a wooden chair, hugging her knees to her chest. She'd barely spoken since Ryan returned from Linda's house, her expression torn between exhaustion and worry. Ryan crouched beside her. "Hey, how are you holding up?" She looked at him with eyes too old for her age. "She's going to be mad," she whispered. "Linda. She'll say you took me." Ryan shook his head gently. "I didn't take you. I helped you. There's a difference." Her gaze dropped to Max, who lifted his head and nudged her hand with his nose. The simple gesture made her smile faintly. "He always knows when I'm scared," she said. Ryan straightened, glancing toward the clock on the wall. "We'll figure everything out soon. But before that, I want someone to check on Max. He's limping, and there's something about that scar on his neck that doesn't sit right with me." He picked up the phone and dialed the number he knew by heart. "Dr. Mason? Yeah, it's Ryan Hale. I need a favor, urgent one. Mind coming by the station?" Dr. Peter Mason arrived 20 minutes later, brushing snow from his worn leather jacket as he entered. In his early 50s, Mason was a tall man with silver hair and kind brown eyes. Years as the town's only veterinarian had given him the patient calm of someone who'd seen everything from barn cats to broken-hearted farmers. "Heard you've got a patient for me," he said with a grin that faded when he saw Max. "Oh boy, that's not just any stray." "He's been through a lot," Ryan replied. "Found him with the girl. Name's Max. Walks with a limp, and there's a mark near his neck. Looks like an implant site." Mason knelt beside the dog. Max sniffed his hand once, then allowed him to run gentle fingers through his fur. "You're a good boy," Mason murmured. "Strong old fellow, aren't you?" He parted the fur and pressed lightly near the scar. Max twitched but didn't pull away. Mason frowned. "You might be onto something, Ryan." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small scanning device, a microchip reader, the kind used for animal IDs. He powered it on, and a faint green light flickered as he hovered it over Max's neck. For a moment, nothing. Then the scanner beeped. The screen flashed a line of text. Mason leaned closer, his brows knitting. "Well, I'll be damned." He turned the screen toward Ryan. Ryan read the line aloud, his voice steady but disbelieving. "K9 Unit Bravo 7. Missing in action. Denver Police Division. 3 years ago." Sophie's head snapped up. "Bravo 7?" she repeated, voice trembling. Mason exhaled slowly. "Ryan, this dog isn't just trained. He's a registered canine. One of Denver's, if the code's accurate." Ryan stepped closer, his heart pounding. 3 years ago, Denver had that warehouse explosion, right? I remember the report. They lost an officer and a K-9. "That's right," Mason said grimly. "The handler died. They assumed the dog perished with him." Sophie's small hands clenched the hem of her coat. "Daddy said Max was a hero," she whispered. "He told me Max once saved a man from a fire, but people laughed. They said he made it up because Max came from a shelter. But Daddy said, 'Some dogs carry stories they can't tell anymore.'" Ryan felt something tighten in his chest. He crouched beside her again, resting a hand on the back of her chair. "Your dad wasn't wrong, Sophie. Looks like Max really was a hero." The girl's eyes filled with tears, her lower lip trembling. "I knew it," she said in a choked whisper. "I knew it all along." She buried her face in Max's fur, and the dog leaned into her, silent and steady. Mason stood, running a hand through his hair. "If Denver's registry still has him marked missing, they'll want to know, but I can hold off on the official call for now, if you think it's best." Ryan hesitated. "Let's keep it quiet until I talk to Child Services and sort out Sophie's situation. I don't want her losing the only thing she has left because of paperwork." Mason nodded. Understood. The doctor packed up his scanner and jotted a few notes on a pad. He's in good health overall. Limps from an old fracture, probably never treated properly. I'll bring some ointment for the scar tomorrow. He gave Max one last pat. You hang in there, soldier. Then he turned to Sophie with a smile. You too, kiddo. He's lucky to have you. When Mason left, the station grew quiet again. Outside, the sky had turned steel gray, the first flakes of snow beginning to fall. Ryan poured a cup of coffee and leaned against the desk, watching Sophie gently brush Max's fur with her fingers. The phone rang suddenly, breaking the silence. Ryan answered. Willow Creek Sheriff's Station, Hale speaking. A familiar voice crackled through the line. Sharp, angry. You think you can just take my stepdaughter without permission? Ryan straightened. Mrs. Carter, calm down. Sophie wasn't safe at home. I'll be filing a report for protective custody. You'll regret this, Linda's voice hissed. I'm calling my lawyer. That's kidnapping, officer. You can't just play hero and steal people's children. Ryan's tone stayed even. No one's stealing anyone, ma'am. You're welcome to bring documentation and speak at the station tomorrow, until. Then, Sophie stays here. You'll be hearing from me, she spat before slamming the phone down. The dial tone buzzed in Ryan's ear. He hung up slowly, rubbing his temple. Sophie looked up. Was that her? He nodded. Yeah, but don't worry. You're safe here. I don't want to go back, she said quietly. You won't, he assured her. Not until we know everything. A long silence followed. The snow outside thickened, muffling the world in white. Ryan glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7. The station would close soon, and the idea of leaving Sophie alone in a back office didn't sit right. He knelt beside her chair. Sophie, how would you feel about staying at my place tonight? It's warmer, and Max will have room to rest, just until we get things sorted. Her eyes widened in surprise. You mean it? He smiled. I've got an extra room and a big backyard. He might like that. She looked at Max, who tilted his head as if approving. Okay, she whispered. Within the hour, they were on the road again. The patrol car's heater blew steady warmth as the snow thickened. Sophie sat quietly, her hand resting on Max's neck. Ryan stole a glance at them through the mirror. The two of them looked peaceful against the backdrop of falling snow, like they had finally found a small pocket of safety in a world that had given them none. As the headlights cut through the drifting flakes, Ryan thought about the scanner's green light, the words on the screen, Bravo 7, missing in action. He couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery was just the beginning, that somewhere behind those tired amber eyes, Max carried a story still waiting to be told. The road to Ryan Hale's cabin wound through pine forest dusted in white, the snow reflecting the faint orange glow of his headlights. It was nearly midnight when the patrol car crunched to a stop in front of the small log house tucked at the edge of Willow Creek's northern woods. The place stood quiet and sturdy, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Ryan had built the cabin with his late father after returning from the Marines, a refuge meant for silence, not company. But tonight, that silence was broken in a way that didn't feel lonely. Sophie stirred sleepily in the passenger seat, her small face softened by the heater's glow. Are we here? She murmured. Yeah, Ryan said gently. Welcome home for the night. He helped her out of the car, one hand steady on her shoulder while Max trotted beside them, his paws crunching softly through the snow. The dog stopped at the door, sniffing once before glancing back at Ryan, tail wagging slowly. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The living room smelled faintly of pine wood and old leather. A stone fireplace crackled quietly, casting amber light across the floorboards. Above it hung framed photos, one of Ryan in uniform with his unit, another of a woman with kind eyes holding a little girl, Ryan's late wife, Claire, and their daughter, Emily, gone for nearly 5 years now. He noticed Sophie's gaze linger on the photos. That's my family, he said softly. They're gone now. Sophie hesitated, then whispered, I'm sorry. Ryan forced a small smile. You don't have to be. They'd have liked you. He brought out a spare blanket and a soft flannel pillow, setting them on the couch. "You'll sleep here tonight," he said. "It's the warmest spot near the fire." Sophie nodded, shyly running her fingers along the fabric. "It's really nice here," she said. "It's quiet," Ryan replied. "That's what I like about it." Max had already made himself comfortable by the fireplace, curling his body so that his nose nearly touched Sophie's boots. The old German shepherd's eyes half closed, ears twitching occasionally as the wood popped and crackled. Ryan went into the kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter watching the two of them. The sight stirred something deep inside him, an echo of the nights when Emily would fall asleep on the couch, her small hand resting on their family's old dog. For years, Ryan had avoided thinking of those nights. Now, with Sophie's quiet breathing and Max's steady presence, the house no longer felt haunted. It felt alive again. He caught himself smiling, a genuine one this time. After cleaning up, Ryan locked the doors and dimmed the lights, leaving only the fire to paint soft orange patterns across the walls. Sophie had drifted into sleep, her hair spread across the pillow, her hand resting on Max's back. The dog's chest rose and fell, slowly, his breathing rhythmic. Ryan sat in the recliner near the window, a wool blanket draped over his shoulders. Outside, snow continued to fall in silent sheets, blanketing the world beyond the glass. For the first time in years, he felt something that resembled peace. But peace in Willow Creek rarely lasted long. Around 2 in the morning, a faint noise stirred Max from his slumber. His ears twitched first, then he raised his head, muscles tensing. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Ryan's eyes opened instantly. The old marine instincts never truly left him. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Max padded to the door, nose pressed against the wood. His hackles lifted slightly, tail stiff. Ryan grabbed his flashlight and handgun from the nightstand, careful not to wake Sophie. He clicked off the safety and approached quietly. A soft sound, a single thud, came from the porch. Then silence. Ryan waited several seconds before opening the door just a crack. The cold air rushed in, biting his face. The porch was empty. The snow-covered steps showed no footprints leading away. Only a dark envelope sat against the welcome mat. Ryan frowned, crouching to pick it up. The envelope was matte black, edges crisp, sealed with no markings except for a single line of block letters written in red ink. "Don't get involved in other people's business." He turned it over in his hand. The paper was thick, expensive, out of place in a town where most folks bought envelopes from the post office by the dozen. But what caught him most was the smell, a faint, oily scent, motor grease and machine lubricant. He knew that smell. Ryan glanced at Max, who was sniffing the envelope too, ears perked. "You smell it too, don't you?" he muttered. The scent triggered a memory. The man behind the vegetable cart at the market the day he'd found Sophie. Ryan had noticed grease-stained fingers, dark under the nails. A mechanic, perhaps. Someone who worked with engines. "Garage," Ryan said softly, piecing it together. "That guy near the east lot. He was watching us." Max gave a short huff, as if agreeing. Ryan set the envelope on the kitchen table, slipped his gun back into the holster, and locked the door again. He checked the windows before returning to the living room. Sophie stirred slightly but didn't wake. Max lay down again near the couch, though his eyes stayed open, fixed on the door. Ryan sat beside the fire, rubbing his temples. Whoever sent that note knew exactly where he lived. And the warning, "Don't get involved," wasn't random. It meant someone in town was nervous, maybe about what he might uncover from Linda's story. He thought about the missing pension documents, the lock on the cellar, Linda's strange defensiveness. There was more to this than child neglect. Something hidden. Something her husband had left behind. Ryan leaned back, staring into the flames. "You've stirred up a mess, kid," murmured, glancing toward Sophie. "But we'll get through it." Max's tail thumped once in quiet response. The rest of the night passed without further disturbance. At dawn, pale light filtered through the windows, turning the frost on the glass into a shimmer of silver. Ryan brewed coffee and stood by the counter, watching Sophie wake slowly. "Morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Did Max keep you up?" Ryan chuckled. "He's a better guard than my alarm system." She smiled sleepily and reached down to hug Max. "He likes it here. I can tell." "I think he's right," Ryan said. "This place feels better with company." He didn't mention the envelope. Not yet. The last thing she needed was more fear. As she sipped hot cocoa at the table, Max stretched near the fire, his coat glowing golden in the morning light. The house felt warm again, alive. But outside, hidden beneath that blanket of snow, Ryan knew the quiet held something darker, secrets that someone didn't want unearthed. He looked toward the window, where faint tire tracks cut across the drive, half buried now by the storm. Someone had come in the night and left without a trace. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "You picked the wrong cop to threaten," he whispered. Max lifted his head as if he understood, and for the first time since his wife's passing, Ryan felt purpose return. Not the hollow kind born of routine, but the kind forged by instinct and duty. He would find out who was behind that warning. For Sophie. For her father. For the truth that refused to stay buried. Outside, the snow fell quietly again, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The storm had cleared by morning, leaving the streets of Willow Creek glazed in pale sunlight and a thin crust of snow. Ryan Hale drove the patrol SUV down Maple Street, the tires crunching softly. In the passenger seat sat Deputy Cole, bundled in his dark sheriff's jacket, a steaming travel mug in hand. Max rode in the back seat, alert and silent, his breath fogging the window. Ryan's expression was grim, focused. He had barely slept since the night of the black envelope. The smell of grease still lingered in his mind. Too many coincidences now. The mechanic by the market, Linda's defensiveness, the cellar Max had growled at. Something connected them all. They pulled up in front of Linda Carter's house around 9 a.m. It looked even worse in daylight. A weathered frame, gutters sagging under ice, and paint peeling off like dead skin. A local magistrate had approved the search warrant an hour earlier based on Ryan's report of suspected fraud and child neglect. Cole finished his coffee and muttered, "You sure about this, partner?" Ryan nodded. "We've got enough to dig. I want to see what's behind that cellar door." Linda opened the door before they could knock, wearing a red housecoat and fake smile. Her blonde hair was hastily brushed, and her voice dripped with forced politeness. "Officers," she said sweetly. "Back so soon?" Ryan held up the paper. "We have a warrant to search the property, Mrs. Carter." The mask cracked instantly. "What? You can't just barge in here." "Step aside," Ryan said firmly. "You can observe, but don't interfere." Linda's jaw clenched, but she moved. Her eyes darted nervously toward the back hallway, and Ryan caught it. That quick flicker of panic she couldn't hide. They began the inspection room by room. The kitchen was cluttered but ordinary. The living room still smelled faintly of smoke and wine. When they reached the hallway, Ryan gestured toward the cellar door. "That's it," he said quietly to Cole. Cole nodded and produced a small crowbar. The lock had been replaced recently. New brass gleamed against rotting wood. Ryan frowned. Funny thing to fix in a house like this. Cole wedged the crowbar in and popped the latch. The hinges screeched as the door swung open, releasing a cold draft that smelled of dust, mildew, and rusted metal. Ryan flicked on his flashlight and descended first, Max padding close behind. The steps groaned under their boots. The beam caught shelves of old boxes, a cracked water heater, and in the far corner, a heavy green safe half buried under a tarp. "Got something," Ryan said. Cole followed, breath visible in the cold air. "That's no junk. Looks military grade." Ryan wiped off the dust from the dial. "Combination lock. But look at the edges. New fingerprints." He turned back toward Linda, who stood at the top of the stairs, pale as snow. "Mrs. Carter," he called. "Want to tell me what's in here?" Her voice trembled. "Old paperwork. Nothing important. Then you won't mind if we take a look." Cole worked on the combination with a small stethoscope tool, the faint clicks echoing through the basement. After a few tense minutes, there was a soft clunk, the sound of a mechanism releasing. He swung the door open. Inside were neat stacks of envelopes, plastic folders, and one sealed document pouch stamped with the emblem of Harrington Life Insurance. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he pulled it out. The label read, Policyholder, Charles Carter. Beneficiary, Linda Carter. Amount, $250,000. He exhaled slowly. Well, well, he murmured. Looks like we found your motive. Linda's voice cracked. That money's mine. He left it to me. Ryan cut her off. Your husband's signature says otherwise. This was never processed. You forged the claim, didn't you? Her hands trembled on the railing. He was going to change it anyway. I deserved it after all I did for him. After you locked his daughter in a freezing room and tried to sell her dog, Cole snapped. Linda's face twisted, her charm gone. That mutt was eating my food, and that brat wouldn't stop crying. You don't know what it's like raising someone else's problem. Ryan's patience broke. You don't raise children by starving them, Linda. You break them. And you nearly did. He turned back to the safe, rifling through the remaining documents. At the bottom was a small wooden box, dusty but carefully sealed. He opened it. Inside lay a folded letter, yellowed with age, and written in a neat, masculine hand. The paper smelled faintly of cedar. Ryan read the first line aloud. If something happens to me, tell Sophie that Max will protect her when I no longer can. His throat tightened. He continued reading silently. I trained Max with everything I knew. He was more than a dog to me. He was my partner. My promise. If this world ever turns unkind, he'll lead her home. Love her enough for both of us. Ryan folded the letter gently, tucking it back into the box. Her father knew, he whispered. He must have recognized Max's instincts. Maybe even guessed he wasn't an ordinary dog. Cole glanced at Linda. You should have left that alone. Instead, you went digging for money that wasn't yours. Linda tried to speak, but her voice broke into sobs. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just needed the money. Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. You hurt her the moment you treated her like something you could sell. He turned to Cole. Read her rights. Cole nodded, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. Linda Carter, you're under arrest for fraud, child neglect, and obstruction of justice. Linda didn't resist as Cole cuffed her hands. She just stared at the floor, mumbling, It wasn't supposed to be like this. Max, who had been sitting quietly near the safe, stood and walked toward her. The faint growl that came from his chest wasn't one of threat, but judgment, the kind that made her flinch and look away. Ryan turned to the stairs. Let's get her out of here. Upstairs, sunlight had broken through the clouds, filling the room with a strange golden glow. As Cole led Linda to the patrol car, Ryan saw Sophie standing on the porch, wrapped in his old flannel jacket. She must have overheard the call from the station and come with the neighbor who watched her that morning. Her eyes went wide when she saw the cuffs on Linda. What's happening? Ryan knelt beside her. It's over, Sophie. You're safe now. Linda shouted over her shoulder as she was placed in the car. You think you're helping her? She'll hate you for taking her only family. Sophie trembled, tears filling her eyes. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. You already have a family, he said quietly, and he's right there. He nodded toward Max, who padded up beside her. The girl threw her arms around the dog's neck, burying her face in his fur. Max leaned into her, tail wagging gently, as though reassuring her that the world still had kindness left. Ryan looked back toward the open cellar door. The letter, the safe, the lie, all of it had finally come into light. He whispered, almost to himself, he really did keep his promise. Cole joined him, wiping dust from his hands. Guess the old man knew what he was doing when he trusted that dog. Ryan nodded, watching Sophie clutch Max tighter. Yeah, he said softly. He trusted the right one. The winter wind stirred again, scattering fine snow across the porch. Somewhere behind them, the basement door creaked shut, sealing the darkness and its secrets inside once more. Snow still blanketed the roofs of Willow Creek when the story broke. By dawn, headlines filled the front page of the Willow Creek Gazette. Local officer rescues girl and exposes insurance fraud. K9. Hero found alive after 3 years missing. The phone at the sheriff's station rang non-stop. Journalists called from neighboring towns, and even a Denver news channel sent a crew. For the first time in years, Ryan Hale found himself in the spotlight, something he had never wanted. He sat at his desk, coffee in hand, watching as Deputy Cole hung up the phone for the 10th time that morning. "You're famous now," Cole grinned. "Better get used to reporters knocking on your door." Ryan rolled his eyes. "That's exactly what I was afraid of." Max lay stretched out near Ryan's chair, one paw tucked under his chest, head resting quietly on the other. He looked older that morning, but calm, as if he finally understood that the chaos was over. Sophie sat nearby, wearing a soft blue sweater someone from the department had donated. Her hair was neatly brushed, and she was feeding Max pieces of biscuit from her palm. Every time he caught the treat, his tail gave a lazy thump. Cole leaned against the file cabinet. "So, the Denver unit called back. They're sending someone from the K9 division to verify the chip. Should be here this afternoon." Ryan nodded. "Good. He deserves the recognition." He looked at Sophie, who was humming quietly under her breath. For the first time since he met her, her laughter sounded unguarded. "You doing okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "They said Max is a hero. I always told everyone he was. They just didn't believe me." Ryan smiled. "Well, they'll believe you now." By noon, a gray sedan with Denver police markings pulled into the station lot. 2 officers stepped out, stamping snow off their boots. The first was Lieutenant Mark Laird, mid-40s, tall, solidly built, with a trimmed beard and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many good dogs die in service. His uniform was neat, but worn from years on the job. The second, Sergeant Ed Wallace, was older, well into his 60s with white hair, sun-creased skin, and a slow but steady gait. He wore a black winter coat and carried a leather folder tucked under one arm. "Officer Hale," Laird said, shaking Ryan's hand. "Lieutenant Laird, Denver K9 Division. Heard you've got one of ours." Ryan gestured toward Max, who stood the moment they entered. "That's him. Max, or Bravo 7, according to the records." Laird knelt, his expression softening. "Well, I'll be damned. Look at you, boy." Max sniffed his hand, tail wagging faintly. Wallace crouched down beside him, slower but gentler, his voice carrying that gravelly warmth only older men have. "You remember me, don't you, Bravo? You saved my grandkid once." Ryan blinked. "Your grandkid?" Wallace chuckled, eyes misting. 3 years. Ago, a gas explosion downtown. Building collapsed. My daughter's daycare was across the street. That dog pulled 3 kids out before the second blast hit. His handler, Officer Jennings, didn't make it. They thought Bravo died in the collapse. He scratched behind Max's ear. "Guess you had other plans, huh, old friend?" Sophie's eyes widened. "He saved children?" Wallace smiled at her. "He sure did, sweetheart. And now he saved you too. Some heroes just don't stop." Laird ran the scanner over Max's neck again. The device beeped, confirming the ID. Bravo 7. Active record, Denver K9 Division, MIA. He looked at Ryan. "That's him, no doubt. Same markings, same scar on the shoulder, lost a toe on his right hind leg during the mission. Matches perfectly." Ryan knelt beside the dog, patting his head. "You did good, partner. Real good." Sophie beamed. "Does this mean he can go home with us?" Laird exchanged a glance with Wallace, then smiled. "If it's up to me, absolutely. Officially, he's retired. He's earned whatever life he wants." Wallace stood slowly, eyes soft. "We'll need to file the paperwork to update his status, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to do something." Ryan nodded. "Of course." The old man walked to the desk, opened his folder, and pulled out a small velvet case. Inside was a silver badge, worn but shining. He turned to Sophie, voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your father saw something in this dog, and now we all see it too. On behalf of the Denver Police Canine Division, I hereby reinstate Bravo 7, now Max, as an honorary canine officer." Sophie gasped softly. Ryan felt his throat tighten as Wallace knelt before the dog and pinned the miniature badge onto Max's collar. Max stood tall, ears perked, chest out, like he understood. The entire room went quiet, save for the crackle of the heater and the faint sound of snow falling outside. Sophie hugged Max tightly. "You're a hero again," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. Ryan swallowed the lump in his throat. He never stopped being one. Laird extended his hand once more. "You did right by him, Officer Hale, and by that girl. Most wouldn't have gone this far." Ryan shook his hand firmly. "It was never about fame. It was about doing what's right." Laird nodded approvingly. "That's what the badge should mean." The two Denver officers stayed for another hour, taking statements and sharing old stories. Wallace spoke about the early days of Bravo's training, how the dog's instinct for compassion was stronger than any command. "He wasn't just trained to protect," Wallace said. "He wanted to. That's something you can't teach." Before they left, Wallace crouched beside Sophie once more. "You take care of him, okay? He's seen enough darkness for one lifetime." "I will," Sophie promised, her small hand resting on Max's fur. "We'll both take care of each other." After the officers drove off, the station grew quiet again. The snow had thickened outside, blurring the world into shades of gray and silver. Ryan stood by the window, watching the car disappear down the road. Behind him, Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, polishing Max's new badge with her sleeve. The dog lay beside her, tail gently sweeping the floor. Ryan turned back and smiled. "Looks like we've got ourselves a celebrity, huh?" Sophie grinned. "He's not just famous, he's special." Ryan nodded, his voice soft. "Yeah, he really is." The room settled into comfortable silence. For the first time since the chaos began, everything felt right. Sophie was safe. Linda was behind bars, and Max, Bravo 7, had found his purpose again. Ryan poured another cup of coffee, sat down at his desk, and watched as the fire in the heater flickered, painting their faces in warm light. Sophie leaned her head against Max's shoulder, humming quietly. The old dog's eyes fluttered closed, peaceful at last. Ryan whispered to himself, "The hero in the shadows finally found his way home." Outside, the wind carried the soft howl of the forest, but inside the station, there was only warmth, the quiet kind that comes after redemption. The first morning of spring sunlight melted through the pine trees, spilling gold across the snowy hills of Willow Creek. The frost was beginning to lift, the air still crisp but gentler now, carrying the faint promise of warmth. Officer Ryan Hale stood on the porch of his log cabin, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, watching as Sophie and Max played in the yard. Sophie wore a woolen hat slightly too big for her, a bright red coat buttoned all the way up, and boots that left tiny prints in the thawing snow. Her laughter rose into the cold air as she threw a stick across the field. Max, now proudly wearing his collar with the honorary canine badge, bounded after it with surprising energy for his age. He returned, tail wagging, eyes shining with the calm pride of a soldier at peace. Ryan smiled quietly. The sound of laughter had returned to this house after too many years of silence. It had been 2 weeks since Linda Carter's conviction. The court proceedings were swift: fraud, neglect, and falsifying documents. Sophie had been placed temporarily under Ryan's guardianship until the adoption papers finalized. But today, it was official. He was no longer just Officer Hale to her, he was Dad. He still wasn't used to hearing it. The memory of the courtroom lingered vividly in his mind. The judge, Marion Goodwin, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, smiling softly as she read the decree. "Officer Ryan Hale," she'd said, "you are hereby recognized as the legal guardian and adoptive parent of Sophie Carter. May this new family bring light to each other's lives." Sophie had hugged him so tightly afterward he could barely breathe. You mean I really get to stay? She'd asked. Ryan had knelt, hand on her shoulder. Yeah, kiddo. You're home now, for good. Now, as he leaned on the porch railing, he could see that promise taking shape in every simple joy, the girl's laughter, the dog's contentment, the warmth of a house that had once felt too empty. He went inside, setting the mug down on the oak table. The cabin looked different these days. Colorful drawings taped to the fridge, a pair of small snow boots by the door, and an extra plate always waiting on the counter. Above the fireplace hung a new photo. Max sitting tall in his canine vest beside Sophie, who held his paw proudly. Beneath it, engraved in a brass frame, were the words, "Bravery never dies." That phrase had been Deputy Cole's idea. The man had dropped by a few nights ago with a small plaque and a grin. "Every hero deserves a wall," he'd said. "Even the four-legged ones." Sophie's voice echoed from outside. "Dad, come see this." Ryan stepped out, pulling on his jacket. Sophie stood near the garden patch where Max was digging happily through the snow. She pointed to the hole, giggling. "He's looking for his toy again. I think he buried it yesterday." Ryan chuckled. You'd think after 8 years of training, he'd remember where he put things. Sophie smiled, crouching down to pat Max. "He's smart. Maybe he's hiding it for later." "Like a secret mission?" Ryan teased. She nodded eagerly. "Exactly." They went back inside for breakfast. Pancakes sizzling in the pan, the smell of maple syrup filling the kitchen. Ryan flipped the pancakes while Sophie set the table. Max sat by his usual spot near the window, watching snowflakes drift lazily over the hill. The morning felt ordinary, but that ordinariness was its own kind of miracle. After breakfast, Ryan drove Sophie to her new school, Willow Creek Elementary. The small brick building sat near the town's library, surrounded by pine trees and the distant hum of morning traffic. Sophie clutched a framed photo of Max in her hands. "Are you sure you want to take that?" Ryan asked as they walked through the school gate. "Yeah," she said confidently. "We're supposed to bring something that makes us feel brave." Ryan smiled. "Then I can't think of anything better." At the classroom door, her new teacher, Ms. Helen Parker, greeted them warmly. She was in her mid-30s with curly auburn hair, round glasses, and a kind but energetic manner that instantly put Sophie at ease. "You must be Sophie," she said, kneeling slightly. "We've been excited to meet you." Sophie smiled shyly, handing her the photo. "This is Max. He's my dog. He's a real hero." Miss Parker's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness! Is that the dog from the newspaper?" Sophie nodded proudly. "Yes, he used to be a canine. He saved people. And me." "Well," Miss Parker said gently, "that sounds like someone we'd all like to meet one day." Sophie glanced back at Ryan and waved before taking her seat. Max watched from the car window outside, as though making sure she was safe before resting his head down. Ryan lingered for a moment, watching her settle among the other children. For the first time, she looked like she belonged somewhere. On the way home, he glanced at the rearview mirror. Max sat quietly, the sunlight glinting off his badge. "You did it, partner," Ryan said softly. "She's going to be okay." Back at the cabin, Ryan spent the afternoon organizing his small home office. On the wall above his desk, he hung a new framed motto. "Protecting others isn't just about the badge. It's about the heart that wears it." Later, Sophie burst through the door, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Dad, they all loved Max's story. My teacher said maybe we can have him visit for Hero Week." Ryan grinned. "Sounds like someone's famous again." She laughed, tossing her backpack aside. "Everyone said he's the bravest dog they've ever heard of." Max wagged his tail, letting her hug him tight. That evening, as dusk fell, Ryan lit the fireplace. Sophie curled up on the couch under a quilt, reading aloud from a children's book, while Max lay at her feet, his head resting on her slippers. Ryan sat nearby, polishing his badge. The crackling of the fire mixed with the rhythm of her small voice, turning the cabin into a pocket of peace the world outside couldn't touch. After a while, she looked up. "Dad, do you miss being a soldier?" Ryan paused, then smiled faintly. Sometimes. But I think I found a better mission. What's that? He looked at her, at Max, and then at the glowing plaque above the fireplace. Protecting others, not just with a gun, but with kindness. Sophie nodded, understanding in that innocent, wordless way children do. That's what heroes do, she said. Ryan reached over, ruffling her hair. Yeah, that's what heroes do. Outside, snow began to fall again, light and slow, settling over the cabin roof. Inside, laughter drifted through the air, soft, genuine, and unbroken. For the first time in years, Officer Ryan Hale didn't feel like he was just surviving. He was living, and he wasn't alone. Winter had returned to Willow Creek, but it no longer felt cold. The snow that once carried memories of loneliness now shimmered like a blanket of peace stretching over the hills. A year had passed since the day Ryan Hale stood in that same square where Sophie gave her speech. Life had changed in ways he never imagined, quietly, beautifully, and without fanfare. The small cabin at the edge of town had grown warmer not by fire, but by laughter. Inside, every corner told a story. A pair of muddy boots left near the door, a shelf full of Sophie's drawings, most of them featuring a brown and black German shepherd wearing a shiny silver badge. The smell of fresh bread filled the kitchen, and the low crackle of the fireplace wrapped the house in a familiar hum. Outside, the world was still coated in white. Ryan stood by the fence line in his thick sheriff's jacket, watching as Sophie and Max played in the snow-covered meadow. She had grown taller, her hair longer, her smile brighter. She tossed a snowball across the field, and Max bounded after it, his legs leaving trails in the powder. "Come on, old man," she shouted with laughter. "You're slower this year." Max barked once, a sound somewhere between protest and joy, before scooping the snowball into his mouth and trotting back proudly. His muzzle had grown grayer, his movement slower, but his spirit burned with the same loyalty that had carried him through every storm. Ryan leaned on the fence, smiling. Deputy Cole had retired a few months ago, moving to Arizona for the warmth, but not before stopping by to visit their little family. "You did good, partner," Cole had told him before leaving. "You gave that girl a life, and that dog a home." Now, as Ryan watched the two play, he thought about those words often. It wasn't heroism that had changed his life. It was faith and the quiet courage of love. When the sun dipped lower, painting the snow gold and pink, Ryan called out, "All right, you two, back inside before you freeze." Sophie came running, her cheeks flushed and her scarf flapping behind her. Max trotted close, shaking snow from his fur. Ryan held the door open, laughing as they stumbled inside in a flurry of warmth and noise. The cabin glowed with soft amber light. Sophie kicked off her boots, grabbed a towel, and started rubbing Max dry. "He likes it," she said, smiling. "He pretends he doesn't, but he does." Ryan hung his coat, watching them. "Yeah, I think you're right." Sophie grinned up at him. "Dad, can we make hot cocoa?" He chuckled. "You read my mind." They moved around the kitchen with easy rhythm. She poured milk, he stirred the chocolate, and Max settled by the fire, curling into his favorite spot beside the old rug. His honorary canine medal still hung proudly on the wall above the mantel, next to framed photos from the past year. One from Sophie's first day of school, another of the three of them at the county fair, and one of Max wearing a tiny paper crown Sophie had made on his gotcha day. After cocoa, Ryan found Sophie at her desk near the window, scribbling something in her small leather journal. Her handwriting was uneven but heartfelt. When she noticed him watching, she blushed slightly. "I'm just writing about today." He smiled. "What about today?" She hesitated, then handed him the open page. The words were simple, but they made his chest tighten. "Dad says everyone has a miracle. Some people find theirs in money, or fame, or luck. But my miracle was finding Max and Dad Ryan. They taught me that real love doesn't have a price. It's something you give, not something you sell." Ryan swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, Sophie." She shrugged shyly. "It's true." His gaze drifted to the wall beside the fireplace. There, in a simple wooden frame, hung the faded cardboard sign from long ago, "Dog for sale, $2." Sophie had insisted on keeping it. Beneath it, she'd written in small letters, "The day my life began." That sign had become their family's quiet motto, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could rewrite an entire destiny. That evening, the wind outside softened into a whisper. The three of them gathered by the fire, Sophie curled up on the couch with a blanket, Max lying across her feet, his head resting on her lap. Ryan sat in his armchair, a book half open, though his eyes kept wandering to them. Sophie stroked Max's fur, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's tired, Dad." Ryan nodded gently. "He's earned the rest." The firelight flickered against Max's coat, painting him in warm gold. His eyes closed slowly, a soft sigh escaping his chest. The sound of peace, not exhaustion. Ryan reached out and placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "You know, when I first met him, I thought I was saving him. Turns out he was saving both of us." Sophie smiled, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes. "He still is." Outside, the snow began to fall again. Slow, delicate flakes swirling in the moonlight. The cabin glowed softly through the storm, a beacon of warmth against the cold. Ryan stood to add another log to the fire. The crackle filled the room like quiet music. Sophie had fallen asleep with her head against Max's neck, her fingers still tangled in his fur. Ryan looked down at them and felt something in his chest ease, the kind of peace only found after years of fighting against the dark. He whispered, "Good night, soldier." Max's tail thumped once against the rug as if he heard and understood. Ryan turned off the lamp, leaving only the glow of the fire. In that gentle light, the world seemed perfectly still. A man, a child, and a dog bound not by blood, but by the miracle of faith, courage, and second chances. Outside, the sign on the porch creaked softly in the wind. The same wooden board Sophie had painted months ago. "Hail, family home. Love resides here." And inside, beside the fire, Max slept peacefully, his head resting on Sophie's legs, his eyes soft and full of quiet trust. A hero at rest, guarding the heart of the family he had built. Winter had returned to Willow Creek, but it no longer felt cold. The snow that once carried memories of loneliness now shimmered like a blanket of peace stretching over the hills. A year had passed since the day Ryan Hale stood in that same square where Sophie gave her speech. Life had changed in ways he never imagined, quietly, beautifully, and without fanfare. The small cabin at the edge of town had grown warmer, not by fire, but by laughter. Inside, every corner told a story. A pair of muddy boots left near the door, a shelf full of Sophie's drawings, most of them featuring a brown and black German shepherd wearing a shiny silver badge. The smell of fresh bread filled the kitchen, and the low crackle of the fireplace wrapped the house in a familiar hum. Outside, the world was still coated in white. Ryan stood by the fence line in his thick sheriff's jacket, watching as Sophie and Max played in the snow-covered meadow. She had grown taller, her hair longer, her smile brighter. She tossed a snowball across the field, and Max bounded after it, his legs leaving trails in the powder. "Come on, old man," she shouted with laughter. "You're slower this year." Max barked once, a sound somewhere between protest and joy, before scooping the snowball into his mouth and trotting back proudly. His muzzle had grown grayer, his movements slower, but his spirit burned with the same loyalty that had carried him through every storm. Ryan leaned on the fence, smiling. Deputy Cole had retired a few months ago, moving to Arizona for the warmth, but not before stopping by to visit their little family. "You did good, partner," Cole had told him before leaving. "You gave that girl a life, and that dog a home." Now, as Ryan watched the two play, he thought about those words often. It wasn't heroism that had changed his life, it was faith and the quiet courage of love. When the sun dipped lower, painting the snow gold and pink, Ryan called out, "All right, you two, back inside before you freeze." Sophie came running, her cheeks flushed and her scarf flapping behind her. Max trotted close, shaking snow from his fur. Ryan held the door open, laughing as they stumbled inside in a flurry of warmth and noise. The cabin glowed with soft amber light. Sophie kicked off her boots, grabbed a towel, and started rubbing Max dry. "He likes it," she said, smiling. "He pretends he doesn't, but he does." Ryan hung his coat, watching them. "Yeah, I think you're right." Sophie grinned up at him. "Dad, can we make hot cocoa?" He chuckled. "You read my mind." They moved around the kitchen with easy rhythm. She poured milk, he stirred the chocolate, and Max settled by the fire, curling into his favorite spot beside the old rug. His honorary canine medal still hung proudly on the wall above the mantel, next to framed photos from the past year. One from Sophie's first day of school, another of the three of them at the county fair, and one of Max wearing a tiny paper crown Sophie had made on his gotcha day. After cocoa, Ryan found Sophie at her desk near the window, scribbling something in her small leather journal. Her handwriting was uneven, but heartfelt. When she noticed him watching, she blushed slightly. "I'm just writing about today." He smiled. "What about today?" She hesitated, then handed him the open page. The words were simple, but they made his chest tighten. "Dad says everyone has a miracle. Some people find theirs in money, or fame, or luck. But my miracle was finding Max and Dad Ryan. They taught me that real love doesn't have a price. It's something you give, not something you sell." Ryan swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, Sophie." She shrugged shyly. "It's true." His gaze drifted to the wall beside the fireplace. There, in a simple wooden frame, hung the faded cardboard sign from long ago. "Dog for sale. $2. Sophie had insisted on keeping it. Beneath it, she'd written in small letters, "The day my life began." That sign had become their family's quiet motto, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could rewrite an entire destiny. That evening, the wind outside softened into a whisper. The three of them gathered by the fire. Sophie curled up on the couch with a blanket, Max lying across her feet, his head resting on her lap. Ryan sat in his armchair, a book half open, though his eyes kept wandering to them. Sophie stroked Max's fur, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's tired, Dad." Ryan nodded gently. "He's earned the rest." The firelight flickered against Max's coat, painting him in warm gold. His eyes closed slowly, a soft sigh escaping his chest. The sound of peace, not exhaustion. Ryan reached out and placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "You know, when I first met him, I thought I was saving him. Turns out, he was saving both of us." Sophie smiled, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes. "He still is." Outside, the snow began to fall again. Slow, delicate flakes swirling in the moonlight. The cabin glowed softly through the storm, a beacon of warmth against the cold. Ryan stood to add another log to the fire. The crackle filled the room like quiet music. Sophie had fallen asleep with her head against Max's neck, her fingers still tangled in his fur. Ryan looked down at them and felt something in his chest ease. The kind of peace only found after years of fighting against the dark. He whispered, "Good night, soldier." Max's tail thumped once against the rug as if he heard and understood. Ryan turned off the lamp, leaving only the glow of the fire. In that gentle light, the world seemed perfectly still. A man, a child, and a dog bound not by blood, but by the miracle of faith, courage, and second chances. Outside, the sign on the porch creaked softly in the wind. The same wooden board Sophie had painted months ago, "Hail, family home, love resides here." And inside, beside the fire, Max slept peacefully, his head resting on Sophie's legs, his eyes soft and full of quiet trust, a hero at rest, guarding the heart of the family he had built. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings, he sends them with paws and gentle eyes. Max was more than a dog. He was a messenger of grace, a living reminder that miracles don't always come in thunder or light. They come quietly, through loyalty, through love, through the courage to stay when the world walks away. This story isn't just about rescue, it's about faith. Faith that broken things can be healed. Faith that kindness can rebuild what loss once destroyed. And faith that even in our darkest winters, God never forgets to send warmth, sometimes in the shape of a German shepherd lying by a child's side. In everyday life there are Maxes all around us, souls who give without asking, who protect without pride. They remind us that love is the closest thing we have to a miracle, and that no act of compassion is ever too small to change a life. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from, and write Amen if you believe that God still works through the love of animals and the kindness of people. May God bless you and your family, and may your home always have the kind of peace that comes when love chooses to stay.